Thank you for joining us today. Now, we have a very special guest, and her name is Michelle Palmer. Sometimes, when we are helping people charged with a crime, people feel that the people who are supervising them, they are the enemy, and that is far from truth. So, there is a whole community that helps somebody once they are being supervised in the community. Sometimes it's pretrial services before they're sentenced. Once they're sentenced, then it becomes a parole officer. Now, Michelle's journey has been across several decades, across 2 countries, and now she is in, I think, the best position so far, where she is in the trenches helping people in our community here in Arizona. Let's welcome Michelle. Thank you for joining us, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a privilege.
I'm so grateful you're here because I think your journey is going to help people understand that when somebody is trying to get back into the community, they can struggle, even if they are being supervised in the community. So I'm going to take you a little bit to Canada. You were in Calgary, and that's what first started you in the supervision field, right?
Sure. It's a fun and fascinating story. I was a single mom in my very young years, and I had an opportunity to take this program called Contemporary Woman. And it was a 6-month program. And they asked us, what's your ideal profession? I wanted to be a lawyer. And because they were going to give us an opportunity to job shadow. But due to confidentiality reasons, they said, unfortunately, we can't do that. But would you maybe be interested in working with a psychologist in the female prison up at the remand center? And I'm like, hey, that's really neat. Her name was Marie McNeely, and this was my introduction to corrections. I loved it, absolutely loved it. And it really humbled me in the fact where I got to see what it was like to be behind the walls, how difficult, and the reasons why women were incarcerated. And just trailing her for quite a while, doing the job shadowing, triggered me to go, I think I want to move forward with this industry. So I went back to school and I got my associate's degree in corrections and criminology. At that same time, I was also becoming a correctional officer for the Calgary Remand Center. So I was getting well known in the institution due to volunteer work and due to becoming a correctional officer up there. Not unfortunately, but at the same time, I was also dabbling with another career. So I chose that career over corrections at that point. I knew I would get back into it. I just didn't know when.
And when you started, I'm sorry, that you
Yes.
were in the pre-sentence realm,
Yes,
right?
yes. So
Okay.
these were gentlemen, very high strung, and women. So I'm sorry, both remand center occupied both genders. Um, Very high stress, very high strung, lots of anxiety, going to court back and forth, and then waiting their pre-sentencing. It was interesting to watch how they would navigate once they did get sentenced, how their personalities would change, how their demeanors would change, and accepting the fact that they're either doing a long time or they're getting out, or how they're going to manage transitioning that next step in their journey of the correctional system or the justice system for that matter up in Canada.
And so then you moved to the US in 2009, and then in 2013, you start working in Arizona in the Department of Corrections.
Correct.
And then you were in Iman?
Yes.
Okay. And so you had at first a combination, right,
Yes.
of individuals. And as a correctional officer, you were inside the facility for 2 years first.
Correct.
Okay. And so then you decided, I'm going to go out in the field. And then you became a parole officer.
Correct.
Okay. So being a correctional officer and a parole officer, those are two different things. When you were inside as a correctional officer, how did your perception change? How did that change you in any way?
Well, let's be realistic in some fact. When you're working in a prison, it's about care, custody, and control. You're in an environment that's incredibly negative. You're working with some very violent people, some people that have caused some horrendous crimes that is very hard to even look at. And as a female, walking into a very heavily male industry can be quite a challenge as well. So when you're navigating that, my perspective was they're still a human being. And it was sometimes it was very difficult if you knew the crime. But in the next breath, I know they are where they are, but that doesn't mean I don't have to treat them with dignity or respect.
Yeah.
And that's what really bothered me a little bit about that. I think maybe it just might be my nature. And it would, hey, inmate, get over here. Hey, inmate, do this. Hey, inmate, do that. Really? So no, that's not where my calling was. My calling was get out into the community. Let's start helping these people. Everybody deserves a second chance, maybe third or fourth. Sometimes it takes us a few times to go around the block to learn our lesson. But that doesn't mean they're not a good person. It means maybe they don't have the skills or the capability or the tools to understand how to make those change, or have very little to no support while they're trying to make that change. So they go back to what they know.
Yeah.
And if we don't teach them new tools, new ways to conquer something and say it's okay to make a mistake and how to move on from that mistake, what are we doing? We're just circling.
As a correctional officer, did you see people get out and then come back in?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. When I was a CO, a correctional officer, not once did I ever see parole walk into those buildings to talk to people. Any wraparound community services come in and say, hey, when you get out, we're here waiting for you. Yeah. Not once.
Wait, so then that's a myth, because I thought that people go in to prepare inmates before they're going to be relieved.
In 2013, 2014, 15, 16, it was a very rarity. In the prison, in the yard that I worked on,
yeah,
which is a very high risk population, which is the sex offender population, not once did any outside service come in to say, let me help you prepare for your release. It was completely unheard of. Completely unheard of.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So what do you expect then?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And sometimes people get released and they come out to a different world. They're not, like, their loved ones might be gone.
Mm-hmm.
Their mom and dad may have passed, or their grandparents, whoever was their support network. And then everything else changes, right? Technology, protocol, how you apply for a job. That's completely different now than when I started looking for a job. That back then you just go in and you fill out the paper application, and then now they even reject you virtually.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, let's look at the two types of concrete jungle that these people are faced with their lifetime, right?
Yeah.
When you get incarcerated, you're walking into a whole different life. And the jungle is all about survival. And you are there to survive. And you have to find your way when you're surviving in there. Unfortunately, Arizona is very segregated when it comes to races, especially in the male institutions.
I've heard, yeah.
It's very hard in Arizona. And then you got to learn how to fit in and learn how to go with what is allowed there and
how to survive inside.
Correct. And losing your family members. I like what you said about losing family members. There's a delayed grief that person is going to experience when they get out. And delayed grief is probably one of the most interesting. I've watched somebody try to navigate after they've gotten released from prison, because you're not allowed to do that on the inside.
Yeah.
It's a sign of weakness. It shows vulnerability. You cannot be that on the inside. When you get out and you're now faced with that, it's a whole different ball game. This concrete jungle is not the same. You know, and this might sound weird when I say this, but when somebody gets incarcerated, they grieve, right? They're losing their freedom.
Yeah.
They're adjusting, they're denying, they're angry, and then they accept it. So it's kind of like the 7 stages of grief, right?
Yeah.
When they leave prison, it's almost like the same thing, because they learned how to survive there. Now this is a whole different type of survival.
And they have to leave their safety.
Yes.
that they learn inside and rediscover themselves on the
100%.
outside.
100%.
So you became a parole officer in 2015.
Yes.
And then when you started as a parole officer, they still had the 3 strikes rule, right? Can you share with people what that meant back then?
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't wait to clear off my caseload. 3 strikes, you're out. 1 dirty UA, 1 diluted UA, 1 missed UA. Those are 3 violations.
So 3 mistakes.
You're done.
And those could happen in rapid succession,
Correct.
right? Like very rapidly after somebody gets released.
100%.
And so the 3 strikes rule meant that you had to go back to prison to kill your number?
Correct.
Okay, so the privilege that people had been working to earn to leave early, that could end very quickly.
Very quickly. Very quickly. When the Senate bill was introduced, it was court ordered. It was a privilege to get that Senate bill. And at that time, if you violated on that Senate bill, 1 violation, it was an automatic return to custody. Then you would come out on your community supervision begin date. So a Senate bill released people 3 months early to give them the opportunity to start navigating back in the community earlier.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so did it matter what mistake it was?
No. Any mistake, it was a violation, you were sent back to prison.
That's horrible. And so what happened then when the motivational interviewing gets introduced? And tell me how you were doing that.
Motivational interviewing was introduced to me my first year that I was there, listening to seasoned parole officers that had maybe the opportunity to take it. It was brand new. It was kind of rolling in. They didn't like it. It was all about, and pardon the phrase, but it was about hug a thug. Why do we care? Why do we have to do this? Why are we investing in this type of a conversation? But for some reason, to me, I really, really navigated towards it. And what motivational interviewing does, it evokes change talk. And if you evoke the change talk, you're going to start to understand what the individual may have experienced, identify barriers. You have the ability to motivate them, encourage them, guide them, and lead them down a path of success. But you can't do that if you don't know what their motivation is or what their history is. Trauma is huge. How do we help them navigate through that trauma?
So is it, and I don't want to minimize it, so I'm trying to just kind of explain to people in a few words. So is it basically that the parole officer would have a conversation?
Correct.
And then they ask questions. Why did the parolee did X, Y, Z?
Let's say, here's a great example. Say an individual drops dirty for a UA.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Motivational interviewing to me is, let's have a conversation about that. What happened? What caused you to make that decision? Let's have a conversation. That's what motivational interviewing would engage with, right? Pull out that information. How can we move forward together as a team or as a really good working relationship so you make better choices next time? Old parole was like, you dropped dirty. I don't care why. We're going to, yep. And we're going to put you into a treatment or a program. That's not fixing the problem. It's putting a Band-Aid on the problem. I understand we have a job to do. When I was a correctional or a parole officer, is care, custody, and control out in the community. If that individual is a community safety risk, then we are alerted. We are alert. We are on high alert. Substance use disorder is not a reason to be sending somebody back to prison. Mm-hmm. An individual that is struggling or maybe having difficulty utilizing tools to help them be successful is not a reason to send them back to prison. We are causing damage if we do not open the doors for them. And we're constantly closing the doors on them. So a real shift happened in community corrections. And I was really lucky and afforded the privilege of having some amazing leadership that allowed me to expose new ideas to help individuals as they were transitioning. And one of the biggest phrases I coined myself was, I can't help you if you run. Right. I can't help you if you don't walk through that door. And you don't have to do this alone. But I can't help you if I don't know what you need. Having those different types of conversations with my individuals, my absconder warrants dropped dramatically.
That's fantastic.
It was a huge success. And with that thought process, I took it to my leadership and said, I got an idea. Let's open up the door to an orientation for people that are getting released and letting them know what our expectations now are on community supervision. Our goal is to not send you back to prison, but you got to do the work, and I'm here to help you with that. When that philosophy started to get weaved out, I'll give up some small statistics. When I was in Mesa Parole as a unit supervisor, we would average about between 47 and 57 absconder warrants a month in the unit. Once the orientation started to roll out and our message was getting out there, our goal is to not send you back. Walk through that door. We're here to help you. We started to average 4 to 7 absconder warrants a month.
Oh, wow.
And those 4 to 7 were jumping from the gate.
Yeah.
So how do we get the gate guys now? Right? How do we get them trust parole, trust the badge, trust the integrity behind the badge?
And as a defense attorney,
Yes.
obviously my perception is different. But I think that the fear of the badge comes way before they even get to DOC.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they get there, sometimes they're correctional officers that are really tough.
Yep.
And even before that, when they are detained at the local jails, that can be rough also, especially if they are, I mean, there's some remote, because I've traveled to a lot of places in Arizona representing clients. Some jails are really tough.
Yep.
And I think it's that people create the perception that everybody's like that. So the fear is tough. And sometimes I don't blame them because I see the brutality. I mean, I see clients who are black and blue sometimes, and then we figured out what happened. Well, sometimes practically nothing, right? So the fear is different. And then suddenly now they get released and they get a parole officer and they have to work with the parole officer.
Right.
They have to trust the officer. So it's a shift in mentality that it's not easy, especially when somebody serves a long time.
You know, and I like what you say there. The fear of touching cuffs is a reality that maybe the average individual never experiences. But the fear of having cuffs, ever touching cuffs, is trauma.
Yeah.
And there's the reality of, oh my God, what is happening to my life? What is happening right now? And sometimes there's resistance because you're scared. You don't know how to react to this. And then things can escalate very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, sometimes that side of the story is not heard. And sometimes that side of the story is kind of pushed aside because the person in a position of authority is being taken over the individual that is being faced with something that they've never experienced before in their life.
So how did you help your parolees to trust you, to work with you?
I talked to them. I was a little unorthodox. I'm a firm believer that the more contact I had with them within their first 30 days of release was incredibly critical. They needed to know they had access to me. They needed to know that they could reach out to me as soon as possible, whenever possible. They needed to know that I was going to listen to them. And let's be real, sometimes all they want is just to be heard. If they're having a bad day, please call me. Please don't make a bad decision.
Yeah.
And giving them just unlimited support in the first 30 days, because it is the most critical when somebody gets released. The average relapse is 15 days of release. If we don't grab them before that 15 days or say, I noticed that we've had a substance challenged issue in your past, let's maybe be a little proactive. Let's maybe do a program and let's keep you on the right track. Let's utilize some tools that'll help you maintain your sobriety on the outside. Do you need a list of AA classes? Do you need a list of this? So I was trying to let them know I was investing in their history to make sure that they didn't go down that path again.
I'm so glad you are talking about this because I also feel that when people serve lengthy terms, they come out to a world that has not only changed what I was talking before, but their support network may be gone and could be both. They go back to their old neighborhood, their old environment, and then those triggers come back up.
Correct. Or an unsafe environment, right? What I like to tell people this might be interesting to say. I had a teacher in university that said, "Why are we telling people we want them to be rehabilitated?"
Mm.
And I'm like, "What do you mean?" Because think about it. Why are we redoing? Why are we re? Why are we re? And I'm like, what about habilitation?
Hmm.
Why don't we start them fresh over here and habilitate them to new skills, new scenarios, new situations, newer environments? Why are we redoing? We should be habilitating.
So, going back to what you said before,
Mhm.
that when you were a correctional officer, you didn't see people preparing inmates for their release,
Not at
for
all.
that transition. And then suddenly now you, as a parole officer, have to deal with the lack of preparedness.
Right.
That's a big gap to fill.
It's huge. When it used to really upset me when I would have individuals being released without their state ID, their access, their social security card, a birth certificate.
They have nothing.
Those are fundamentals that we need them
Yeah.
to survive.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, if they owed parole, if they didn't have that within first 15 days of their release, they were scrambling. And officers were like, "Well, I told you to get it." Well, $15 is a lot of money if you don't have that.
Yeah.
I got really lucky and really pulled in community services and wraparound services and found vouchers for people that didn't have that $15. I got bus passes for them so they could go get food because they didn't have enough money starting their $10 an hour job to put food on the table, enough to put a roof over their head, but not food. So I really dug to try to help them be successful. But we have to do that.
And it's just so tough. Can we talk about housing, how people struggle, right? Sometimes people go to halfway houses that are sick and dirty, right? I have clients that have called, like, they're calling and they're like, I can see the lice in the head of the other people here. Like, I can see them from my bed, or bed bugs, or things like that.
So what an injustice. We are setting them up for failure. I would run too if I had to live in an environment like that. Coming from such a negative place, going more into a situation that is going to cause more damage because now you've got fear, you've got stress. If I leave here, I could be violated, I could be arrested. My parole officer said I can't leave without his permission, or my parole officer said I can't leave, and if I do leave, I'm going to be violated.
Yeah.
So now the threats come into play, right? Why not saying, hey, are you sure you want to reside at this halfway house? Why aren't we getting into them sooner and saying, these are the places that are approved. These are good places. This is what you need to prepare for your release. And let's set you up for success before you even get out. And I like what you said there. There was nothing when I was a correctional officer. When we started the orientations in the community, and trying to get the guys at the gate, that's where I went to my supervisor in community corrections and said, I got another idea. We need to get in. We need to get in and tell them what our expectations are on parole so we can maybe alleviate or give a different perspective of what to expect now when they get out, especially if they had a negative experience before. So we started to target 120 days to the gate and said, start preparing for your release.
Countdown. Let's get ready.
Right. Really. And that's even a short time frame.
Yeah.
But let's be realistic. Go to your CO3 and say, can you help me with these applications? Take accountability and responsibility for your release. Don't let anybody tell you what to do. Aren't you done with that?
Yeah.
Do some research. Talk
Wait.
to people.
I'm glad you said that. When you're in prison, people tell you what time to sleep,
Yep.
what time the lights go off, what time the lights go back on, what time they do a head count, etc., etc.
100%. And now I'm coming to them saying, why are you at the mercy of a CO3? Here's a list of halfway houses. Why are you not investigating these halfway houses? Because there's information about that. You can get the CO3 to investigate that.
CO3 is inside.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
And there are the ones that are kind of helping these guys get ready, prepared for their release. But let's be real. There's 1,500 inmates on 1 yard. And you're preparing all of those release packets for those individuals, trying to help them find placement if they're not going to a residence. You're also doing their state ID application. You're also doing their access application. So really, do they have time to do all of this?
No.
So what I would tell the inmates is go to them with a small list and say, can you help me with this? Instead of saying, what can you do for me? This is what I need assistance with.
Yeah.
Their respect factor shifts, right? They're showing that you're starting to prepare for your release. They're showing that you actually, I need to put some thought into this. I want to make sure I'm getting released to a safe place and somewhere that's clean or somewhat and fairly respectable and somewhere that I can afford when I get out holding a part-time job.
Yeah.
So that shifted. And I always tell, even right now when I have the privilege of going in to talk to the incarceration people, is don't ever be at their mercy. It's you. You need to be selfish and you need to work with them and say, what can we do together instead of what can you do for me?
Yeah.
And this is where peer support falls into play. And huge advocate for peer support.
And basically, it's a learning process.
Heck yeah.
And so when you were a parole officer, you at the beginning you had about 65 to 75 parolees. That jumped to 120.
Yes.
And now the numbers for current parole officers, it's around 65 to 80.
Yeah. They
right?
balanced it out, which is really good.
Yeah, but you continued. You became a unit supervisor in 2018, 2021 a regional supervisor, and then in 23 facility administrator.
Correct.
And now in 2024, then you became the justice liaison for Valleywise.
Yes.
And that is outside of the correctional system.
Correct.
And so now you no longer work for the Department of Corrections in Arizona, but working for this organization. And this was a brand new position that they created for you.
Correct. It was a privilege that they were starting to, the Valleywise Health is the county hospital in Maricopa County. They decided to focus on involving justice individuals. How could they help justice involved individuals after they got released from prison? Let's be real. There's a lot of things that go on behind those walls that individuals are trying to deal with.
I'm going to say it flat out. There are a lot of drugs inside the Department of Corrections. Sometimes I have clients who are struggling to stay clean and sober. And then they go in only to have to join a group because they have to find protection based on race. And then a lot of times people fall back into old habits and then they start using again. They might not be the same. They might be able to get something else, but there's a lot of drugs inside the Department of Corrections.
Correct. And Hep C and HIV and sexually transmitted diseases and chronic illnesses that they're either developing while they get on the inside because they're aging through their sentence, or something that they've incurred or that they're going in with. So it's not just Arizona that has a poor medical system. It is across the United States.
Yeah.
And it's an epidemic that I know they're trying to come up with solutions for because it's very expensive. I understand that, but there's got to be a better way. And it's hard when you see people. And that's why, again, I like that. What can we do better?
Mm-hmm.
This is what we're doing better. We're getting in. We're saying, get that doctor's appointment 3 to 7 days after you get out.
And so those individuals who may develop or continue their addiction, then they get released. And so you're trying to work with population now to help them with their addiction and their health.
100%.
Yeah.
Medically assisted treatment is evolving very quickly with all departments.
And so for people that don't understand what that means, let's just bring it back to square one. If somebody has an addiction and people say, oh, just stop using, just quit cold turkey, right? But there is a second way to do it where there is a medical intervention, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that medical intervention means that they can get other drugs to stop them from using more harmful drugs.
Yeah, I would say a medically assisted medication to help them get off, sustain, or prevent.
But there are drugs
Yes.
that are approved
Yes.
to be administered by a doctor.
Yes.
So they don't go to the corner to buy drugs.
Correct.
Okay. So back in 2022, there were, you said about 480 some medically assisted treatments.
Correct.
And that number jumped to over 6,000 now.
Yes.
And so these are people who are taking Suboxone, methadone. And so there are other drugs that are Vivitrol and Brixadi.
Yeah.
Okay. So those are the medical alternatives. And you're trying to help these individuals because there's two components, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. The two components are you got the medication that helps with the withdrawal, the sustaining, the cravings, and helps the person navigate to try to somewhat focus on not wanting to use. The part that's missing is the treatment aspect. You're physically addressing those medical needs with the medication, but the psychological aspect of that addiction is missing, and that's where the treatment aspect really needs to come in.
Is there treatment, the psychological treatment in DOC?
No.
But they do the medically assisted programs?
Yes.
Okay, so what happens when individuals get released and they have been on some of these medications for a while?
We make sure we follow up. Now, there are a lot of providers that provide medically assisted treatment here in the state of Arizona, which I think is fantastic. But do it right. Add the treatment part, and that's what's missing.
So for parents, spouses, and mothers who are watching this, if they have a loved one who is struggling with addiction and then they have been on a medically assisted program, like let's just say Suboxone, for example, how can they help them to get the treatment while they're on the outside?
They need to let the individual know they do not have to do this alone. And I think individuals that struggle with an addiction, the shame and the fear of a relapse is very difficult. The letdown of their family member can be incredibly difficult. Involving the family and helping them understand what addiction is in reality and how to handle and work with somebody who's going through an addiction and not enabling them is incredibly critical. If we arm them with knowledge while this individual is going through what they're going through, they're going to unite. That individual is going to start trusting the family, and the family is going to start trusting that individual. Identifying certain behaviors, identifying certain ways that they may start to respond to things may be an indicator that, hey, something's not right here. But what can we do together instead of kicking them out and saying, I'm tired of hearing you say I'm sorry, is, hey, let's get into some treatment. Let's help us navigate this together.
That is so tough for families.
It is.
Because a lot of people don't have the skills or the tools to know how to help their loved ones and what to do. So partnering with Valleywise is something that they can do.
100,000,000%. As a mom, I want to fix it. As a family member, we want to fix it. We can't fix it for them.
Yeah.
We have to allow them to go down that journey and let them find their way to that path of success. I was told this once in an AA meeting, and I overheard this conversation in an AA meeting, is if we deny somebody their rock bottom, we have done them an injustice. And I was thinking, wow, what a very, very profound,
powerful.
Because it's hard to see somebody go through that. It's hard, especially as a mom or a brother or an aunt or an uncle, whoever your loved one is going through that process. They have to hit that in order to grow. But if we keep stepping in and trying to fix it for them and enabling them and saying, I got another program for you, I got another program for you, we're not doing them any service. We're not doing them any good. They have to want it. They have to move in that direction. What we need to say to them is, I'm waiting for you. I'm here to support you, and I'm ready to help you. And that's not being said.
No, and I think sometimes, and I talk to my clients, but I also talk to their families, their
Hmm.
wives, their girlfriends, mothers, aunts, grandmas. Sometimes people feel defeated
Hmm.
and frustrated, especially because rehabilitation costs so much, right? So any rehab is costly. So Valleywise, can somebody who doesn't have a lot of money reach out to the program and participate?
100%. I'm very, again, blessed that I had the career that I had with the Department of Corrections. I'm indebted to them for all the training and everything
Mhm.
they enabled me to do. And with that, I built so many connections on the outside. If I don't know where to send them, I'm going to reach out to the next expert that I know in the industry. And if they can't help them, we're going to find somebody to help them. As long as that person's willing to do the work and willing to try, I will fight with them 100%. And we'll
Yes.
wrap them around a team that's going to fight with them. But they got to do the work, they got to be ready.
Yeah. So it's okay if people don't have a lot of money. It's okay if they're on access.
Hey, we accept everything.
Perfect.
Yep.
So that's what I want to make sure. And you having the training experience in your career in the Department of Corrections have seen the stages
Mm.
that individuals go through, and now you're helping them from a different angle. So
Yeah.
it makes you the perfect person to be in this position to help people.
I'm not here to advocate for Valleywise Health, but I do want to say this. When I was a correctional officer in Iman, and we needed to take people to the county hospital. There's a stigma attached to a county hospital,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Um, Now that I work for the county hospital, I'm telling you, Valleywise Health is absolutely gorgeous. They treat
They have
people.
changed.
Oh,
It's not like it used to be.
no.
It went through a remodel in Valleywise. It's
Yes.
an organization that has taken over the county hospital for the last decade or so. So
Yeah.
it's a makeover they've gone through.
Amazing. And being treated with dignity and respect, and no matter what, they're going to help you. Even if you don't have insurance, they're never going to turn you away. And before you leave, they're going to make sure that there's a plan of action in place in case you need to come back for a follow-up, or in case you need to see a specialist moving forward. They're going to make sure your needs are being taken care of. Not walking like we walk into an emergency clinic and they go, your number,
Yeah.
right? Check the list, check the list, check the list. And they think they know, you know. No, they're going to investigate. They're going to give you the time and the effort and the care that you're entitled to and that you need at that right time. So I'm proud to say I work for a county hospital right now.
Yeah.
Considering how far I've seen the county hospital evolve, it's amazing. Absolutely amazing. It could be any county, but I'm very fortunate that have this opportunity with Valleywise Health. And to take that experience and that knowledge into the institutions, because let's face it, this is a very difficult population to work with. And it can be incredibly intimidating working with this population when you see the tattoos, the gang affiliations, and all of that stuff. And they're walking into a hospital, visually can be
Mhm.
impairment. Like, a lot of people get scared of these individuals. When in reality, they're just coming in because they do need medical needs, their medical needs met just as much as you do.
Yeah.
And they treat them with that respect when they walk in through Valleywise Health. And I'm honored to say that.
Michelle, what if you and I are here sitting in Phoenix in Maricopa County,
Mhm.
but what if somebody, let's say, served time in a prison outside of Maricopa County, outside of the valley? Does that matter to Valleywise? Can somebody who served time in DOC and they happen to be in Pima County or in Douglas, can they still apply for services and ask Valleywise for help?
Absolutely. Why not? Um, if they're willing to make the journey to come up to Maricopa County to see that
Yeah,
primary care provider, why not? The other thing, too, is Maricopa County is huge. And
yeah,
we got a lot of prisons here in the state of Arizona.
we do.
And a lot get released to Maricopa County. So when they're coming into Maricopa County, we have a TIP program. It's called the TI Justice Program, that are waiting for them to say, hey, let's get a doctor's appointment set up for you.
So that is great to know. So what if somebody the loved ones who are watching this show,
Mhm.
they have somebody who's going to be released. Can they help facilitate that and get an appointment set up in preparation for the release?
So I'm going to gloat a little bit about an amazing project that we created for some individuals in the Lewis Institution, Perryville Institution, and Phoenix West.
Okay.
It's called My 180 Days.
And Perryville is the
Female,
female
yeah.
prison. Yes.
It's called My Reentry Journey, 180 Days of Purpose. We created a team of peer supports. We go into these institutions and we have conversations, interviews with the individuals 90 days prior to their release, 60 days prior to their release, and 30 days prior to their release.
That's fantastic.
These interviews consist of identifying barriers, individual needs, individual areas where they need to investigate to help them for their release date. In other words, what kind of employment are you looking for? Do you want to go back to school? So we're getting to know the person with that one peer support, which is fantastic.
Same person.
100%. As they get to navigate with that, right before they get released, we're excited to say, when you get out, call me within 72 hours. But we're also making a doctor's appointment for them before they leave that institution. We're taking and stripping away the barriers of, I didn't go because I didn't have transportation. We'll help you with that. I forgot. No. You need to be accountable for this. So this is why we are utilizing some tools that we're giving you, and while I'm working with you on the inside. So we help them really build that trusting relationship with somebody that's very been there, done that, and understands that journey. The 30, 60, and 90, where the wrap of the 180 days come into play, is that we're wrapping around them as they're transitioning. So say they lose their job or they need assistance getting domestic violence classes because they're trying to get custody back of their children. We're going to help them navigate and get into those programs. And we're going to follow up with them. How are you doing?
Yeah.
What's working for you? What's not working for you? What's your relationship like with your parole officer? Then we see them again at 60. We have that conversation again, and then we see them again at 90. And this is where the evidence comes in. What can we do better? Tell us what we can do to help that next person, because you've done the journey. What's different? What would you change? What did you like? What didn't you like? So we can make it better for the next person coming out. So we're learning from our individuals that we're trying to help.
Yeah.
Because they're evidence, right? They're the ones, we can't change them. They're the evidence. They're the ones that are going to make the change. We can guide them and provide them with the tools and the navigational skills to get them in the right direction. But they're the ones that make the change. They're the ones that reduce recidivism, not the Department of Corrections. They do.
Michelle, this is such a great program because sometimes, like, I have clients that are so scared. They're scared to go to the Department of Corrections, and then they're scared what's going to happen to them inside and what is life going to be after. So as a correctional officer, parole officer, and now in your position, have you seen people be successful?
Abso-freaking-lutely. And how rewarding is that?
Yeah.
I like that you say that. It was, I was again just in Perryville the other day, and this young lady walked up to me. She goes, "Are you Palmer?" And I said, "Yes." She goes, "I think you were my parole officer." And my running joke with them is, "Did I send you back to prison?" And she goes, "No, you were actually my favorite parole officer. You really worked with me when I got out there." And I said, then my next comment is, "Well, what are you doing back in here?"
Yeah.
And they're honest with me.
Yeah.
I made some bad choices and it got really hard and I didn't know how to do this. And this is what happened. And I said, "I understand that. So what's different this time coming out?" She goes, "Well, are all parole officers like you?" I said, no. However, remember, approach determines response, right? That's a famous phrase in law enforcement. Approach determines response. Have that conversation with your parole officer. Go out there prepared.
Yeah.
These are my goals. This is what I intend to do. When you do that, their perspective of you changes. They're willing to work more with you when they see that plan of action in place. And yeah, we still got the odd crusty one there, or the ones that are still, this is what I do for a living, but there's still policy that they have to follow.
Yeah.
And there's still, as a supervisor, when parole officers would come to me and say, "Ms. Palmer, I want to return this guy to custody," before I would even consider it, I would say to the officer, "What have you done with them? Have we exhausted everything? And is this person becoming a safety issue to the community?
Right.
You are not committing crimes if you are struggling with an opioid addiction. However, you may commit a crime to support the addiction.
Right.
But are they a community safety risk? Are they hurting somebody? So let's take a look at that. If we put them in a proper program for 90 days to get them established to go in a better direction, would that be more productive than sending them back to the Department of Corrections where they're not going to get anything?
So that is so important
Huge.
to know that. That's why I tell my clients there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. So even if you go serve time, sometimes it's finding and identifying those individuals like a parole officer or a correctional officer, somebody who's going to help you through your journey. And not everybody is going to be there to be helpful, to guide you.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of like when we fix our brain to find the goodness, you can find people like Michelle, who is going to help through in the journey.
If we don't do this as a team,
Yeah.
we're giving mixed messages. And taking it the next step further is when we introduce this program to the institutions. Because I loved my job in community corrections, this now has been introduced to community corrections and peer supports.
Yeah.
So the connections now aren't the parole officer doesn't know what to do. The parole officer can go, hey, let me reach out to your peer support. Let's see what we can do together to help you navigate this. And or the peer support can go, hey, let's reach out to your parole officer and let them know that this is our A, is it okay if we do this? And B, number two, this is what we're doing to help them navigate through this situation that they're in. And working together is going to let that individual know they're not doing it alone.
Yeah.
There's no more mixed messages, and they've got support no matter what. I'll tell you, I will work with somebody until I'm blue in the face if they are willing to do the work. If they are messing up constantly,
Yeah.
hey, it is what it is, but hey, I'm going to put you in another program. Let's take a look at this one.
Mhm.
And if they're willing to do it, it's hard. Addiction is really, really, really hard. And again, we got to let them know we're there for them. We're there to support them, but I will not enable it.
Right.
They have to do it. They have to
They have
want
to
it.
do their part,
Yeah.
and you will help them. So what we're gonna do in the comments, we're gonna put, we're gonna link Valleywise there so they can
Sure.
reach out to the program and get more information.
Sure.
I'm so very grateful you came with us today,
Thanks for
Michelle.
letting me get the message out there. I
Yeah.
think it's fantastic.
I'm very grateful for your visit today, and thank you for all the work you're doing in the community. Thank you for joining us, everybody, and until next time. Thank you.